Thanks much. And I'll tell you what, that is a lead in that's going to be really fun to live up to. So thanks. So I appreciate that a lot, Lisa. You will also notice if you look carefully that I've got the little red thing on. And look, I'm an economist. We practice the dismal science. I need to stay in character. But I will say there are some challenges here that I want us to be aware of as much as opportunities. And then we're going to have a little fun. We're going to talk about some things that are going on. Some of the numbers that I'm about to give you are not going to be pretty, but it is the reality of where we are and where we need to do some things in our regional economy to pivot. So let's see here. If I point it this way, there we go. 2025 shaping up to be a pretty ugly year for us. We lost about 56,000 jobs. Yes, driven a lot by the fork in the road separations. One of the things that was interesting, we don't have these numbers for the region, but nationally, only about 15% of the reduction in over 200,000 jobs across the nation from the federal workforce was actually RIFs, reduction in force. Most of it was that voluntary separation, the fork in the road. Now, of course, if your boss comes up to you and says, if you don't quit, I'm going to fire your butt, is that voluntary? But you still have this real downturn. And just to give you that pace, if you look back over the last few years, that those blue bars are showing, month over year, compare 1 month to the previous year. So that way we don't have to worry about seasonality and hiring, all that. And what you'll see is that what we've lost this year at our pace of job growth that we're doing, we're talking about 2-3 years to recover. And that's if we were to immediately go back to the growth patterns that we were getting 3 years ago. So this is not something that's going to be fixed in 1 year. If I look at some of the particulars, and I'll talk about these individuals, there's a whole bunch of data on this slide. The bar and the little number at the end of it is the job losses in the 12 months, so December to December. What's in the little box is comparing the job count as of December in this region to what it was pre-pandemic. So February of 2020. And what is really scary to me is, of course, federal government, we knew that. And let's face it, we were told it was going to happen even before the election. What is scary to me is that professional and business services. That's the highest value added profession and the largest sector outside of government for us. And we now have 10,000 fewer jobs than we did in February of 2020 in that sector. What is interesting about that is if you look, and we'll look at moments though, in just a moment, I'll show you another slide that we'll get into it. It's a slowdown that isn't completely attributed to DOGE. Education and health services up. We've been hearing the stories that national job growth is at this point about 80-85% health services. And that's not all knee surgeons and brain surgeons and high-end nursing. This is a lot of home health aides and stuff like that. So the net impact on total income is not that great when we see that. But what we're becoming is a very almost monolithic job growth story, if you will. Some of the other sectors that you're seeing, leisure and hospitality, we had a little bit of growth last year actually, but we're still down. We've never recovered to pre-pandemic levels in leisure and hospitality. Retail trade, down a little bit for the year, up a little. The interesting one is construction. Construction has been a hotspot here. What is that construction building? Well, there's a little bit of housing, but not enough to matter that much and not as much as we need. It's data centers and industrial. And what do we seem to be having a political narrative wanting to do? We want to not build any more data centers. We want to kill whatever goose is laying that egg. Of course, some people say it's a rotten egg, but there's a lot of it. If we're talking about AI of the future, where do you think that AI is going to live? This breaks down professional and business services into two key things. The professional technical side, which is accountants, computer programmers, lawyers, architects, engineers, and then the yellowish one is more services to buildings. Now, one of the things that we're still seeing now, of course, with the reduction in federal jobs, some of those jobs are coming out of federal buildings and some of those jobs are coming out of lease space. And so we're continuing to see high levels of vacant properties. And indeed, like in the district, CFO of the district, Glenn Lee, recently said in his reviews that, and what I've heard in the business briefings, few high-end Class A properties, trophy class properties doing pretty well. Big lobbyist firms, things like that still. But below that, 30% of the office space, even in Class A, are now delinquent and maybe going back to their lenders. So we have some real challenges that are impacting not only the business cycle of that, but the tax base. And yet, unemployment still looks pretty good by comparison to U.S. numbers. I mean, the district has elevated a good bit. Northern Virginia is still at 3.3%. Now, that's up over 100 basis points over a year ago. But that's, you might remember from 8 a.m. Economics 101 a long, long time ago that, somewhere around 4.5%, 5% is kind of like just normal churn, right? So it's a really weird thing. Now, you'll notice that we got that dive down at the end of the charts over there. Well, that's just because we will never know what the rate is for October. Our current administration said, you don't need to know that. Don't worry about it. But it brings up some really interesting points, and particularly off of some of the things that Brent was saying that, we've heard the national economy characterized low fire, but also low hire. But there's a lot of dynamics that are going on that we're really being confused. Some of it are companies that are readjusting their employment after kind of getting exuberant during the pandemic, and they're rebalancing. But of course, the easy thing to say is, oh, well, AI is causing us so. No, you just overhired for a couple of years, right? Just say it. But in any case, that's going on. We talked about internships a little bit later, and this is completely anecdotal. I don't have solid evidence. I just know what I hear. I do a lot of these talks and lunch circuits and stuff like that. And I hear companies saying exactly the message that Brent was talking, that, companies are doing more and more hiring of interns. I also have repeatedly in meetings asked the folks in the room, the business people in the room, to raise their hands as if they count internship time as work experience when that person comes back to them for a regular job. And I have yet to see a hand raised. So when I'm sitting in front of a classroom telling students, you really need to do internships, you really need to do internships, and you're going to get all this valuable experience, it's valuable experience maybe, but it's valuable experience that our hiring managers are not recognizing at time of hire. My statement to you guys, go back to your companies, your employers, and if you're in the position, make that change. If not, start really thinking about the messaging that you're really sending out to these young people. If you say, yes, this is important, but we don't count it. That's a real conflict that we need to try to move the narrative beyond. There are some other things that are going on. One of the reasons that I have the red dot on here, we're already seeing, and we have brilliant people at George Mason about artificial intelligence. Some of them may be in the room. I'm not brilliant about it, but what I see in the reports is that despite the advanced computing power, the level of capability of AI is actually starting to plateau. If AI is so much better, how come it still gives me hallucinations, wrong data, etc.? A couple of examples. We were working on an outlook of number of students for one of our local school districts, just something we do for there. I was sitting there on a Saturday and I was, finishing up writing the report, and I couldn't remember a number off the top of my head, so I asked how many students were in that school district. It only missed it by a factor of 10x. Recently I was updating a paper. We had submitting, finished a project a couple of years ago doing the thing of publishing a book chapter, and I asked to update the literature review. Got journal titles right. It got the subject matter. It got the article title right. Even the review of what the article said wasn't bad. Every author was wrong. I don't know how it does that. See, this is the thing. Artificial intelligence can't regulate itself. It doesn't have the judgment to look at something and say it doesn't know. It just spews it out with confidence. Kind of like a freshman in class trying to tell me he knows public policy because he watched a TV show once, right? So we have some real challenge. And what it boils down to is what we have to continue to emphasize. And if you have been to previous sessions here, we've had folks talk about original intelligence, human intelligence. And we do have, there's a company that we have had as guests before in these called Hubside that actually has mechanisms for having to measure it. And it measures what are you bringing in terms of creativity versus what AI can do. I think it's worth checking out, but just consider that concept that the value that we as humans are bringing to the equation is our creativity. And the more we rely on AI to help us with that creativity, we'll actually start homogenizing our thinking. So we need to have that balance of using AI for a tool for those things that work on, but also realize that if we start letting it think for us, we're going to have the same questions. And this gets to competitiveness in businesses. If you think AI is going to help you drive your business processes, you will perform no better than every other company because every company has access to the same big, large language models. So you want the competitive advantage. It's what you can bring out of your people in true creativity and innovation. Not process innovation, but base innovation. All right. I'm being told to move through, so I'm going to hit you just a couple of things to think about. We're real challenged in this market about migration patterns, and this data ends in June of 2024, so we won't have so recently. But if you look at this, if it wasn't for international migration over the last 3 years that we had here, we would have had net negative population growth. Well, do you think we're going to have net international migration now? So I just challenge you that our labor force, remember, companies move where they find the labor they need. If we're losing labor, if we can't hold on to some of those federal workers that are being challenged now, we lose assets. Had to do this. Ken, you may like this one. This is AI helped me draw this. Best one I've ever done. You got three things that you're trying to do with economic development. You attract businesses, you grow your own, and you retain the ones you have. Well, this is a publication called Area Development that ranks metro areas and metro divisions. And I look down there and where we rank among the 949 areas that they do, what I'm telling you is that for us, business attraction is a real challenge. We have to tell a story, and unfortunately, we have to tell a story that's different than we've told before, where it's Fairfax telling their story, it's Montgomery County telling their story. We've got to tell a regional story about the assets and the advantages that we have. COG is working on this and with others. Amy and others of us are working on these things to try to get folks to think regionally, at least as our messaging out to an external audience. But what this means is it's really important for us to grow from within, particularly over the next few years. I want to finish with just one other thing for you to think about. We keep talking about AI as if it is a singular mass thing, and I know that the Anthropic and ChatGPT, they want one model to rule them all. But the fact is, the AI industry is really subdivided, and these are just some that I've been thinking about. I'm sure there are others and more distinct ones. But I want you to look at these and think, some of these, we have existing natural competitive advantages. but which ones do we need to move into to grow beyond federal government dependency? And with that, think about that through the rest of the day. These slides, certainly Ron and his team will have these slides available if you find them useful. If not, hit us up at our website. You can find these. Stay there. Okay.
Get this stuff. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Catherine Kemp. I'm Vice President at Captivate, and I'm going to help facilitate some Q&A. To kick us off, Amy Liu is here to think about from your perspective and stand up and introduce herself.
Hi, Amy. Did you know you were doing this?
Amy Liu at Brookings. Terry, great job.
Thank you.
My question is, I'm just going to put you on the spot to kind of help everyone in the room think about action, because I think that is the sort of the spirit of the convening. There is a group of people who are taking the data that, Terry, you've been. How do we take a really sobering period to our region's advantage? We make sure there's growth and opportunity coming out, very strong headwinds against certain industries, and a real desire to diversify the economy in new ways to create growth and demand for workers. So this conference is about AI and skills. Mm-hmm. The question for you is, in that environment, and especially given the talks that you're giving, is what advice do you have for the region's leaders about where future demand is going to come from? How do we undergird future sectors? And where do you think, I like that last slide, where do you think the biggest opportunities are? And I say this because I know we're going to have a lot of conversations about workforce and AI skills today. But my experience in working with regional leaders on regional economic development across the country, you can't ignore employer demand.
What?
Employers are not demanding workers. It's really hard to signal to workforce trainers, educators, and others about how to create the labor force that's going to support that growth. And so we can't ignore the importance of sector-based growth, industry growth, and employers in this conversation. So it's a very long-winded way of really asking you, Terry, like, where would you recommend leaders focus on when it comes to where future sectors and demand is going to come from for our workers?
It's a little bit like the Rodney Dangerfield movie Back to School, where he is asked one question in 72 parts. So let's just say that we're gonna do real quickly. I'm gonna take a little bit of liberty and just say, if I had to message, if we were nothing but elected leaders in this region, I have some key messages. One, first of all, we have had huge success in this region over multiple decades, not so much the last decade, but the growth of the federal sector, and particularly the growth in procurement spending and the shift from federal employees to contract workers and things like that. We got very big, we got very wealthy as a region by sitting back and not stopping things from happening. We are not in that position anymore. There is no company that has to locate here, even among our federal contractors. So we have to reimagine how we do economic development as approach from attracting investment as opposed to accepting what people are just wanting to throw at us. And that's a mindset. And part of that mindset then gets into how long does it take us to get, say, buildings done through the development process. It's often for us 24, 30 months to get approval processes through land use management because everybody wants the say in it. One of our larger construction companies now has done the analysis, and for them, every month of delay costs 1% of the project. So you think about what is our number one challenge about workforce in this market? It's the lack of attainable housing. across all areas. I'm being told that I need to be quiet now. And very loudly I'm being told. But I would say that we have got to do a better job of getting the housing that the market demands so that we can slow down domestic out-migration, particularly at a time when folks are being challenged about what job they may have at that moment. We also need to use the intellect. We're the smartest region in the country. We need to be using that to be at the forefront. What is the biggest challenge that we have about data centers? It's power. What we're generating that power from, how we're distributing that power, how we're using it, and I would tell you that we need to be on the forefront. If we are going to have small modular nuclears as a source of energy, I want them to be located near this region so that they're supplying us. If we're experimenting with microgrids, we need to have local land use regulations that encourages it to happen. Innovation is where growth is going to happen, and it will either happen here because we specifically encourage it, or it will happen someplace else, and we will be coasting and just not as good as we could be. So I think if that, and we look forward to moving, the AI interactions are all there, but it gets down to basic, where is the right infrastructure? And where is the right talent? And how do you keep talent? By having it to where they can afford to live and thrive in a region. Oh, and by the way, that does include dealing with childcare too, right? It is how do you, and so one of our challenges, that number about the unemployment rate, what that actually implies to us is that our labor participation rate is probably dropping. All right, and with that, I think Ron probably has other things that he wants to do today. I'd be glad to do it, but thank you very much.